Welcome to the Next Gen Planners Morning Commute. I'm your host, Adam Carolan, and we also have Rohan Sivajoti. Right,
Morning.
Rohan?
Yeah, very well. Sun is shining. How are you?
I'm good. I'm smiling to myself because I've got an absolute doozy later on for the competition stroke quiz.
Nice. Looking forward to that.
Good one, this one.
Looking
I
forward to
thought about it about 4 o'clock this morning, and I'm really happy with myself. I woke up.
By the way, I did like pressure today because my dad's listening.
Right.
So I'm not allowed to swear or anything like that.
Is that why we've got two Rohan Sivajoti?
I'll keep it clear. No.
What's your dad's name? Give him
Karuna.
away.
Karuna. I don't think his video's on, but he's there.
All right, okay. Right, let's get cracking. So today we have Karen Mailing from the GI Consultant and also Ian Else from For Financial Planning. Hi, guys.
Hi.
So they're going to be doing a phone-in, aren't they, Ro?
They are, yes. Yes, they are indeed. And that's going to be all about building a good advice process. So anything that you would like to ask, please ping them through. Karen's an excellent compliance expert. Ian's recently gone out and done his own thing. So two great people in terms of building advice processes to get those questions in.
Great. Okay.
And where are we now? Ah, yes, it's news time, I believe, isn't it? New model advisor, here they come. And who have we got today? It's Will. It's Will. All right. Okay. Hi, Will. How are you, mate? You all right?
I'm very well, Rohan. Thank you. Yeah.
Good man. So, what is going on in the world?
Well, right, here we go. Yes. So the news. So something from the FCA this morning on small businesses that should interest all of you, I thought. So they've written to the CEOs of insurers a sort of Dear CEO letter. You may be thankful not to be on the receiving end of this one this time. Kind of interesting. It's about insurance. So it's about whether, small businesses claiming on their insurance, obviously because of the pandemic and business interruption and so on. Interesting. Obviously says when you've got no pandemic cover, obviously there's no obligation to pay out. But it says there are policies where there is cover or it's clear a payout is due. And this is the interesting bit. The FCA says it's important claims are assessed and settled quickly, and that the process should be settled as soon as possible. If there are reasonable grounds to pay part of a claim, but not to make the payment of such claim in full, we'd like you and your board to adopt that policy of an interim payment. So basically encouraging basically to just hurry up and pay some of the claim rather than wait to get the whole process, wait to pay the full claim in full. I thought it was quite interesting. They basically say if you disagree with this, talk to us about it. You perhaps will know more about your own policies and when this circumstance might arise. But I thought that was very interesting about this idea of end-to-end payments. Basically, FCA trying to giving the insurers a big kick to get cash to small firms as soon as possible. But I don't know necessarily what the grounds of an interim payment would be if there was any confusion about what the full payment would be. I think they're saying it's more to do with the admin process than anything else. Basically, just front up a bit of cash to help businesses out in the short term, because it might take a long time. And they've also established a small business unit. It's got all sorts of the great and the good heading that up. But that's going to coordinate the activities of the FCA across small business issues. And ensuring coordinated response by the FCA, blah blah blah, and coordinating with the FOS as well. So again, that small businesses unit. We'll try and we'll publish this in a second, and you'll get more information. But that might be obviously something you want to engage with, so obviously let us know how that's getting on. I think briefly on markets, I think they're down a little bit. I hope I'm not wrong about that. It didn't seem like big movements today. Just some other news we've got. Quilter, those guys. They're merging the Lighthouse and Charles Darby names as part of a big shake-up there. For those of you, you may have worked in those businesses or you may work at those businesses or in the past. But it's just some big names in the past who are sort of disappearing as they get merged in. So that was quite interesting. Just finally, sort of reminder, because it's in the news today, even though we published it yesterday, a lot of the newspapers and news outlets are leading with an OBR forecast about coronavirus, which is pretty gloomy reading, but it is just one of several different outcomes. but it's that coronavirus could cut GDP by 35%. So if that happens, so basically looking at, I think, a sort of deficit and economic circumstances that are worse than they've been in a very long time. I think deficit worse than it has been since the Second World War. And yeah, sort of, so it's it's just a little bit sobering reading, but it's just one possibility of several. But just to point one other thing out is that we put up our virtual event roundtable videos up over the last couple of days. Have a look at those. There's a guy there called Mark Stevenson, who's a futurist and a speaker at our events, who we included in that. He's a very switched on guy, and it's worth listening to, especially about how long he thinks the sort of total pandemic situation might last. Basically, while the lockdown may be over in 3 months, the total sort of atmosphere that we're living in under the shadow of COVID won't. And certainly one of the reasons is that it's because of sort of undeveloped, developing countries. If they can't beat COVID, then we're still going to be in danger. So you might see, if you're reading the FT today or the last couple of days, there's a lot more in there about that. And I would sort of encourage you to read about it, because it puts our local picture in context. And you can sort of give you a little bit of future sight as to what might happen. And that's all from me today.
Right, Chris, over to you. Well-being thought for the day.
Thank you, Adam. Morning, everybody. So today I want to tell you about a new app that I recommend you download and have a play with. It's by BIQ. I'm sure many of you will know Neil Bage. The app is called Beam. I found it by putting BIQ, B-E-I-Q, into your app store. And then the app itself is called Beam. Neil is behavioral finance, and this app, you can have a go at it yourself, but you'll be using it with clients, I have no doubt. And it enables you to tell the client's behaviors around money and your own behaviors around money. So I think attitude to risk will be, in 5 years, a bit of a thing of the past. We won't be looking at attitude to risk anymore. We'll be looking at people's behaviors. So have a play with it. I'd love to see some comments tomorrow. If you say you've had a go at the app and what you think of it. We're trying to get Neil to come on to the morning commute. And I'd also like to do a little plug, which Adam has said thank you for. So thank you, Adam. I've just on Zoom.
Chris, you've muted yourself.
Don't know how I did that. Sorry, thanks, Adam. I've just sent a link on Zoom, which is to a webinar that Neil Bage and I are putting on. The IFW is bringing you this webinar, 3 60 to 90-minute webinars about behaviors of clients and how to coach those behaviors. So take a look at that, and we'd love to see some of you on there. But have a play with that Beam app and let us know what you think of it tomorrow.
Thanks, Chris. Awesome.
Brilliant, Chris. Thank you ever so much for that. We are running slightly behind, Chris, so I'm not going to ask you a question about it. So I'm just going to whiz on. Okay, cool. So we're going to go straight on to now today's Q&A with our guests, Karen Malin from the GI Consultant, who's a compliance expert, and Ian Chuck Norris Elfs from 4 Financial Planning.
Who's
good
a
morning,
compliant
both.
expert?
How are you both? You all right?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Rohan.
Good
Yeah,
stuff.
good. Thanks, Rowan.
Good stuff. Lovely to see you both. And look, so we're going to be talking about building a really good advice process. There's going to be some great questions coming through shortly, but we'll start with some NAF pre-prepared ones that I've got here. So I'll start off with yourself there, Karen, if that's all right. With regard to what do you think the fundamentals of a good advice process are?
Oh, you'll like this. I hate to sound like the FCA, but I think that the fundamental is knowing your client really well, and what they want, and what makes them tick, what makes them happy, obviously. And it's KYC, which is that horrible anachronism that everybody talks about. But I see files where I can't even tell what the client does for a living. It'll say something like company director, which is terrible. To know so little about someone you're advising. So I think that's pretty central, knowing your client.
Absolutely, spot on. And Ian, you've obviously just branched out and set up your own shop. What are the fundamentals of your great advice process?
I don't think they're very different from what Karen's just said, really, but maybe coming at it from a slightly different non-compliance direction. It's kind of identifying your ideal client at the outset, and being really, really clear on who it is that you're looking to encourage to come into the business, and use that as the focal point to then the sort of building blocks, the foundations of your advice process, building that out from there, and structuring everything you do to serve that client in the best possible way you can, while being compliant and meeting your regulations.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. And Karen, so obviously you've done compliance for sort of hundreds and hundreds of firms. Can you give some really good examples of stuff that you've seen that firms have literally input into their processes that could be shared today?
No, you're all terrible. No, that's a bit harsh. I really like to see the approach that Ian's just explained there, where you know the sort of person that's going to benefit from what you do, the sort of person you want to deal with, and you design it around them. And a lot of firms are doing this now since the prod thing came out, and once somebody had interpreted that, we're starting with a typical client and we're designing something for them. Whereas I think historically the centralised investment propositions were designed for the IFA. They were what we like, what suits us, what facilitates charges. But walking in your client's shoes and what they like, as Ian said, and also stick to your knitting. If a client isn't for your firm because you don't cater for them, say so, or go back to the drawing board for them.
Okay, and for those firms that, I've just seen a question come through in the chat there, for those firms that are perhaps a bit, I guess, stuck in previous ways, really want to change up their advice processes and stuff, but have these, big client book already, that kind of stuff, how do those firms go about trying to make a change?
It's actually a transition that I'm seeing, usually when the old guard starts to retire and the youngsters come in, which makes it easier because there's an excuse for the change. A lot of firms do things just because that's how they've always been done. Doesn't mean it's the best way. What I find firms do is introduce cash flow planning to instigate the change, and they can go hand on heart and say, this is new kit. We didn't used to have this. We've got this now. So I can throw all my fag packets away when we can use this. And they start the transformation of the process with that, and they start recording objectives. I mean, it's hilarious in old files. You can go back 10 years and have not a clue what the client's objectives are. And that is the way to change, is perhaps introduce a new piece of software and use that as the catalyst and the excuse for making the change to your firm.
Excellent, good stuff. And Ian, I did actually do a bit of research for the call today and had a quick look at your website and all that kind of stuff. And I was really interested to see the different pricing strategies on there and the different ways that you approach things. Can you explain how that sort of intertwines within your advice process?
Well, nearly everybody else that I know probably claims to have built a kind of a first-class client-centric advice process. I like to think mine's slightly different from that. Is that my advice process was built around what's good for me and the company, and it's very, very rigid. And during the first meetings with clients, I explain to them that anything that they can perform, any task that they can perform, as well as I can, they're going to have to do it. And the flip side to that is it saves me an awful lot of time doing lots of donkey work. It's not client-centric. It's not client-friendly in that sense. But most of the people seem quite happy that, with a reasonable sized portfolio, I can pass on some pretty big cost savings over, if you listen to Lancat, the average advisor fees 0.84, so with a £250,000 portfolio, I can pass on a big cost saving at that. And that's all built around a non-client centric portfolio. And like Karen says, if somebody doesn't fit that, if somebody wants that kind of very much, high touch hand holding service, they're just not right for me. And I'll send them to somebody else, and probably somebody in this room, I would think.
Interesting. Okay. And for those people, that was really interesting around what you sort of said there around you built the firm so it suits yourself, which makes absolute sense, doesn't it? And for those people who are perhaps listening to this, who are thinking they're going to go out and do their own thing, Ian, what advice do you have for them in terms of building their advice processes?
Well, I think you need to decide, like I did, whether you want to be EasyJet or whether you want to be Emirates First Class. I think what the problem is with a lot of advisors I've met over the years, and as a broker consultant, my issue is with them, a lot of them are charging for Emirates First Class and delivering an EasyJet service. I think there's nothing wrong with an EasyJet service as long as you charge for it. There's nothing wrong with an Emirates service, you know, as long as you provide it. So I think that's the first step. Once you've identified that client and the demographics of it, you need to then decide, you know, what level of service that you're going to be offering them. And I think it's a very crowded space of Emirates in the financial advice world. I'm looking at the faces on this and the ones that I know. And the ones that I know are all providing really good first-class services to their client. You know, mine's different from that. Mine's just the essentials, and I think there's space there.
Absolutely, good on you. Good on you, Ian. Very good. And another question that's just come through the chat here is in terms of it's one for you, Karen. Do you think that prices can become a bigger issue post-coronavirus?
It might become a bigger issue for advisory firms because, of course, it's all ad valorem percentage-based charging. So as the stock market crashes, your annual recurring income will fall. So for the client, I don't think so. I think clients like the alignment of your ongoing charge with the performance of the investment. I think that's that side of it. Although I'm not wild about percentage-based charging, it does have that beneficial effect. And I've never seen clients pinking about that. It's almost like they don't feel it. But I like Ian's idea. He's absolutely spot on. There's a need for some budget advice process. People who are in the accumulation stage, you can't charge them sort of fees that you can charge a wealthy individual who's built up stacks of investments. And also, you don't have to wipe their bottoms for them, so you can charge less. That is a perfect scenario. And one other thing to think of, these guys who are coming through, who haven't got a lot of wealth, you want to encourage them to build up their wealth, because they're your future. It's like a marketing strategy. They don't maybe quite cover their costs, or you're not making money out of them, but you've got a loyal clientele behind you that you've been sending alerts to, useful updates, and not necessarily reporting to them every year because they don't need that. But you might have warned them at the tax year end, told them about tax breaks, and got them into the way of investing and thinking about it. You might have done some cash flow with them. Those clients will be your people whose wealth you'll be managing in the future. And at that point, they will become profitable. So it's worth thinking about your loss leaders. Instead of buying leads, make your own.
Good idea. Very good, Karen. Very, very good idea. And sort of, I was just going to ask you a similar question to what I asked Ian there, because Karen was fundamental in me setting up my advice business right back at the start in 2015. And thank you for everything that you helped me with there and continue to do so. So for those people that are considering perhaps going out alone, I think a lot of people struggle with where to start with this. So where would you say is the best place to start for those people?
With a plan. Just as Ian described, Ian had an idea, a plan, and he converted that into a reality. You need a good plan. It's a really good idea to talk it through with other people as well. And that's what's quite lovely about NextGen. There's lots of us that you can sound your idea through. And it's the first thing I do with someone who comes who wants to set up a new business is talk them through capital adequacy, how much money they're going to need, how much they're going to need to live on, almost like financial planning, and also the viability of their idea. I turn down a lot of people and say I'm not going to do it for them because they're just going to lose their fee because they haven't sat down and made a 3-year plan.
Okay, very good. Okay. Ian, just quickly coming back to you here. So within your sort of cut down service and the, I'm sure it's far better than EasyJet, by the way, and I think you're perhaps doing yourself a bit of a misjustice there. But without this question sounding like it's aimed at somebody who leaves business cards in a phone box, what are the things that you don't do?
One of the rules when I set up the business is that I wouldn't spend money on anything that didn't benefit every client and a core benefit. You know, and I was sat there with a will writer at a networking meeting the other day who was telling me that he only paid £4,000 for his corporate membership at Castle Combe, and what great value it was. And it made me want to vomit, if I'm honest with you, because, you know, his clients aren't all going to benefit from that. Most of that benefit's going to be him and his mates, yet all of his clients are paying for that. So anything like that's being cut out. You know, I use coronavirus, I think if you take away the health aspects and the dangers of it, but for IFAs, it's just such an amazing opportunity for everybody to make some changes in their business that are long term, that improves their profitability. And that's because I use Zoom. I always have used Zoom. You know, I don't use the post unless it's absolutely necessary. I don't travel to meetings. You know, I don't entertain. Everything, you know, the fundamental of it, the process is probably no different from everybody in this room. It's just everything else around it that unless it benefits every single client, it just doesn't happen.
Interesting. That's really good.
Ro,
really,
I've
really
got a
good.
quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
So who was the real tight ass Tomo?
I have learned from the master. There's no question. He taught me lots.
He did, didn't he? Bless him. Good man. And look, Ian, just sticking with yourself there for a minute. How are you sort of finding things at the moment? Have people started adjusting to the way of the world and getting in contact?
No, it's murder.
Okay.
Yeah, murder. It was doing really well, so there's no question about it. If you'd asked me in February, I was happy. The inquiries were coming in. I was taking on twice as many new clients as I needed to keep things afloat. Most of the clients I spoke to, because I'm so brash about the service levels, you know, I don't try and hide what they're not getting. I make a point of selling what they're not getting. You know, and it was working really, really well. But then it hit a brick wall of coronavirus. So, but hopefully, as I was saying to Adam at the start of this meeting, at the end of it, things will improve, you know, and we'll all come out of it stronger. But my new client inquiries have finished.
Okay, interesting. I think a lot of people here in a similar situation. I certainly did fall off a cliff, but I've just seen a few green shoots this week. We've had a couple of inquiries this week, and I think people are starting to adjust to this way of life and realizing actually they just kind of need to get on with it. And you will find that people now actually have time on their hands. So I'm sure it will come back around. I can see those green shoots coming. So thank you very, very much to both of our panel guests today. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you ever so much for your time. And I'm now going to pass over to Mr. Carolan.
We're going to have a bit of a session on PI next week, which is obviously a really hot topic. I think Matt has offered to come onto the show. But anyone who's been through this horrendous process recently and wants to talk about it or just get some questions ready, we just want to have about 10 or 15 minutes on that session because I know it's a particularly hard one for a lot of people. So yeah, that should be a really good one.
Tomorrow we have an interview with Damien Rylett and also Marketing Focus with Phil Bray and Alistair Walker. We shall see you all again bright and early, 8:30 tomorrow morning. And thank you very much to everybody for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.